On Friday, May 12, 2017, the world experienced a new kind of crisis. It was fast, it was silent, and it was indiscriminate. This was not a missile launch or a natural disaster. This was a piece of code released onto the internet that became the most destructive global cyber attack in history. In a matter of hours, a malicious software known as WannaCry or WannaDecrypt 0R swept across 156 countries. It was a digital plague, locking up the systems of major corporations, FedEx, Honda, Nissan, but its most terrifying strike was against the human cost. In the United Kingdom, the National Health Service, the NHS, was thrown into chaos. Hospitals found themselves paralyzed, their digital records encrypted, their systems displaying that same chilling ransom demand. Appointments were canceled, critical operations were postponed, and, most terrifyingly, ambulances carrying emergency patients had to be diverted away from hospitals that could no longer function. The immediate fallout was devastating. Nearly 20,000 hospital appointments canceled, over 80 NHS organizations crippled, and billions of dollars in global damage. But WannaCry was not just sophisticated. It was a weapon of mass disruption, forged in the fires of state-sponsored cyber espionage and unleashed by a fatal chain of institutional failure. We must ask, how did an exploit developed by one of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies fall into the hands of criminals? And why was the global community so catastrophically vulnerable to a threat that everyone should have seen coming? The story of WannaCry is not a criminal genesis. It is a story of a weapon escaping its cage. The foundation of the attack was an exploit known as Eternal Blue, and this exploit was born inside the confines of the United States National Security Agency. Eternal Blue was a masterpiece of digital infiltration. It specifically targeted a protocol in Microsoft Windows called Server Message Block, or SMB. This protocol is essential for sharing files and printers on a local network. By sending specially crafted network packets through port 45, Eternal Blue could remotely execute code on unpatched computers. It was a perfect, invisible entry vector. For years, the NSA chose to stockpile this vulnerability. They deemed the ability to use Eternal Blue for intelligence gathering against foreign adversaries to be of greater value than disclosing the flaw to Microsoft so that it could be fixed worldwide. This is the central moral paradox of the cyber age, known as the vulnerability equities process. Do you weaponize a global flaw, or do you fix it? The NSA chose weaponization. Then, in April of 2017, the decision backfired catastrophically. A mysterious hacking group known as the Shadow Brokers stole and publicly leaked a massive trove of the NSA's cyber tools, including Eternal Blue, onto the internet. The keys to the digital kingdom were now in the public domain, available to any criminal or hostile state. This was not a zero-day attack, a flaw unknown to the vendor. Microsoft had already developed and released a patch for the vulnerability MS 17010 in March. The critical problem was simple human negligence. Thousands of organizations globally, unwilling to pay for updates or simply too slow, had failed to install the fix. The stage was set. A sophisticated weapon was publicly available. The targets were willingly left exposed, and the launch date was set for a Friday, when IT departments would be at their weakest. At 0744 UTC on Friday, May 12, the WannaCry worm began to spread, starting its initial infection in Asia. The crucial factor was its worm component. WannaCry did not need a person to click a link. It was self-propagating. Once one machine was infected, it would immediately scan the network for the specific open port of the SMB vulnerability. It was the fastest-spreading cybercrime attack the world had ever witnessed. Within minutes, unpatched systems were crippled. The worm used a tool called Double Pulsar to install the malicious software payload. Files were instantly encrypted, locked, and appended with the ominous WCRY extension. The ransom note appeared, demanding payment in Bitcoin with a chilling 3-day countdown. Pay, or the key would be permanently deleted. The scale of the global chaos was almost unimaginable. Over 200,000 computers infected globally. Yet, nowhere was the fear more tangible than in the hospitals. The UK National Health Service was paralyzed. Computer systems critical for patient safety, from accessing records to managing chemotherapy orders, were rendered inaccessible. Hospital trusts scrambled, reverting to paper records, faxes, and landlines for basic communication. The systems were simply too old. A disturbing 5% of the NHS estate was still running the unsupported Windows XP operating system. This wasn't just data loss. This was a direct threat to life. 5 emergency departments across England were forced to activate diversion plans. Ambulances, carrying patients in urgent need, were rerouted to alternate facilities that were miles away. This was the moment the world understood that a digital attack could inflict physical harm. The crisis was absolute insanity. The world watched, bracing for a global lockdown that seemed unstoppable. WannaCry was spreading faster than any human response. But the catastrophe was about to be halted, not by an international task force, but by a 22-year-old security researcher working out of his home in the United Kingdom. His name was Marcus Hutchins, known online as Malware Tech. Having learned of the NHS crisis, Hutchins began his own forensic analysis of the malicious code. He was racing against the clock, searching for a flaw, an Achilles heel, that could give the world a chance to fight back. Deep inside the worm's intricate code, he found it, a long, nonsensical web address. This address, a seemingly random string of letters, had not been registered. Hutchins recognized this as a common defensive technique. He registered the domain promptly. His intention was simply to track the malware's infection numbers. He paid $10, registered the domain, and pointed it to a sinkhole server. What he did not realize was that the domain was not a tracker, it was a kill switch. The original version of the WannaCry worm was programmed to check if that specific website existed before it began its malicious process. If the website was unreachable, the malware proceeded to spread and encrypt. But if the website was found, the malware would do nothing and immediately shut itself down. At 15:03 UTC, just 7 hours after the attack began, the worm's ability to self-propagate was neutralized globally. Marcus Hutchins had accidentally pulled the emergency brake on a catastrophe that threatened critical infrastructure across the planet. He became an overnight, accidental hero. The crisis was over, but the questions were just beginning. The first, who was behind the attack? The official attribution, formally announced by the United States and the United Kingdom in late 2017, pointed squarely at the reclusive nation of North Korea. Specifically, they blamed the notorious state-sponsored hacking collective known as the Lazarus Group. This confirmed the attack was not merely a criminal extortion attempt, but an act of economic warfare using stolen state cyber weapons. WannaCry's existence forced a brutal re-evaluation of government policy, the very policy that allowed the NSA to hoard eternal blue. Cybersecurity experts argued that the government's decision to stockpile such a powerful exploit, rather than disclose it, had created an uncontrolled cyber weapon that resulted in billions of dollars in global damage. This systemic failure spurred new urgency for disclosure and patching across global agencies. But the most complex reckoning belonged to the hero himself. Marcus Hutchins' sudden fame led to unforeseen scrutiny. Months after stopping WannaCry, he was arrested by the FBI in Las Vegas. The charges were not related to WannaCry, but to criminal acts from his past. The creation and distribution of banking malware, including the Kronos Trojan. Hutchins pleaded guilty to 2 counts related to these earlier cybercrimes, facing up to 10 years in prison. The world was suddenly faced with a profound moral question. Should a criminal who saved the world be punished for his past? At his sentencing in 2019, the district court judge delivered a powerful conclusion. The judge acknowledged Hutchins' past activities but focused heavily on his undeniable public service. The heroic act of stopping WannaCry was weighed against his prior black hat activity. The judge stated that Hutchins should seek a pardon, recognizing that his journey represented a dramatic shift from harm to immense public good. The ultimate legacy of the WannaCry attack is not the $4 billion in losses, nor the number of encrypted computers. It is the enduring lesson it taught the world, that the greatest threats often come from within our own walls. The attack was successful because of preventable institutional negligence. Despite repeated warnings and the availability of a patch months prior, countless organizations worldwide, from major freight companies to critical hospital trusts, failed to update their software. The most basic failure of cyber hygiene amplified a geopolitical threat into a global disaster. Today, the threat is more sophisticated than ever, evolving from the original worm into the highly profitable business model of ransomware as a service. Yet, the vulnerabilities remain the same. WannaCry was the global wake-up call, demonstrating that when technology, policy, and human nature collide, the result is a crisis where the digital collapse can lead directly to human tragedy. If you found this video interesting, let's know your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.